Welcome to the Firehouse Roundtable podcast, brought to you by the Ventura Fire Foundation. My name's Peter McKenzie. I'm one of the hosts. I'm a retired fire captain with the City of Ventura Fire Department.
And I'm Jason Kay. I'm an active fire captain also with the Ventura Fire Department.
And we are excited that you are going to spend some time with us at the kitchen table, learning about firehouse issues that we're trying to bring awareness to.
Thanks for joining us as we discuss the issues of being a firefighter, both on and off duty, and how it affects us.
Let's get right to it. Hey, Jason, how's it going?
I think I'm doing pretty good. I'm stuck in this fog world right now. I just worked for 3.5 days and averaged just under 4 hours of sleep a night. So I'm a little bit foggy today, and I'm kind of figuring out what to say and what to do. So I'm looking forward to see what comes out this episode.
Oh, good. Yeah, you never know. You might surprise us. No, I mean, you bring up a good point. I mean, that's one of the struggles that the firefighters face, sleep deprivation. And there's studies out there that say sleep deprivation is akin to smoking. I don't remember what the number was, but it's not good, which affects mental health and all the things the foundation's trying to fight against. So evidently you're going to be the poster child of that on this episode. So good luck with that.
I'm not surprised. I can tell you that it's not real healthy. I've read a bunch of the studies too. It's not good for your brain health. It's not good for cancers. I know there's some resetting stuff that needs to do, but I got a few days off coming up. So hopefully I'll get recovered and get back up from it.
Good. I'm excited about bringing Bill Moses on the podcast. He obviously is the CEO of Flying Embers, been a supporter of ours. Looking forward to diving into his story. He has a connection to the Thomas Fire, which is quite interesting, and the brand itself has a connection. So excited about having that conversation.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited also to have him on. I know he was the presenting sponsor at our last award ceremony for the department and for the foundation, and he's always ready to give of his time and his finances to the foundation. So he's definitely a good teammate of ours.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's get into it. Bill, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you on.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so for our listeners, we have Bill Moses with us, and I'll kind of read through your quick bio, but I really like to give you an opportunity to kind of share your bio, because it's sometimes it's more relevant and impactful when it's coming from the guests themselves. But for people who don't know, Bill's the founder and CEO of Flying Embers. We have a relationship with Flying Embers, and we're excited to have this conversation. But Bill's been involved in a lot of businesses, wineries, probiotic drinks, and now this Flying Ember. So Bill, why don't you take a minute or two and kind of just introduce yourself to our listeners, and then we can kind of go from there.
Sure. No, thanks. By way of background, I live in Ojai, California. I've lived there for over 2 decades. Came out from the Midwest. I was raised in Ohio in a sort of a little bit of a rural setting, and I ended up stopping off in New York for about a decade, and then coming out here. Fell in love with California. Got very much involved in, I guess you could just say, growing, planting, winemaking. Created in California a retreat center where we did all sorts of things, from meditation, yoga, to culinary events, to having folks like Patagonia over, and other sorts of local brands that wanted to use the space. And so we provided for that. During that time, I got involved with the Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council, where I was a co-founder. I've always had a real respect for fire and first responders and everything they've done. So, some 15 years ago, whenever I was studying the land and learning more about the fires that have swept through Ventura County and the unincorporated areas of Ojai and whatnot, I saddled up with a couple of folks, including the crew, and we started the Ojai Fire Safe Council, which kind of got me rooted with the local fire community. And out of that, I've developed some relationships, which when I needed some support, there was a lot of local support given back to me. So, I'm currently the CEO of Flying Embers. It's a hard kombucha, hard seltzer, canned cocktail manufacturing company here in Ventura, California. We're nationwide. We really pride ourselves in real quality ingredients, and organic and 0 grams of sugar. So as it relates to drinking something that isn't that has some positive attributes to it, we kind of think about that. But at the end of the day, they're just great tasting and really trying to stimulate folks to have a good time and feel good about having a good time. And that's my background. Oh, and I should say before that, I got involved and was a CEO and co-founder of another local company in Ventura called Kavita. And after 5 years, we sold that to PepsiCo. So have a lot of roots in building and selling, food and beverages here in the county.
Love the local connection you have, and I think that's how we became connected was from the Thomas Fire, and I know there's a story behind the Thomas Fire on your end, but maybe we can jump right to that. Like, what is Flying Embers' connection to the Thomas Fire? Because the Thomas Fire, obviously, for our listeners, which the majority of our listeners are firefighters, so they all know what the Thomas Fire is, but for people who aren't, was the largest fire in California history when it occurred, and then shortly was eclipsed by another fire that was larger. But it was quite an event in our area. We lost a lot of houses. I know there's a connection between your story and the Thomas Fire. So if you're open to sharing that, would love to hear that.
Yeah. So first off, Flying Embers was an idea that was really being experimented with, and the fermentation culture was all being developed in Ojai on the property. As it relates to that, we when the Thomas Fire hit, we had several days when we first saw it over past Santa Paula, where some local firefighter friends of mine who used to live on the land came over and said, Bill, we got to get fire ready because you're right on the edge of the Los Padres up here in the foothills. And so we went into action. Craig Doolittle was one. Several other local firefighters from the LA County all the way up to Ventura County, like rallied around the property. I live in an all wood tinderbox matchbox home up there. It's a National Historic Landmark home that is literally all wood. So we knew that if one spark hit, we were going to go up in flames. And so we just started rallying around to getting fire ready. And that was really 2 days of preparation. And of course, during that time, when the fire finally crested and was up on the Nordhoff Ridge, they had evacuated Ojai and we had stayed behind. My family had left, and the winds were blowing. I'm sure many of you remember, but when the winds were blowing and gusting 70, 80 miles an hour, and I was watching the fire jump, and it was so dry. And, there was a moment in time when there was, I think, 7 of us that had stayed back. Now understand that the property on Upper Foothill Road was a place where local fire departments came, and it was a big enough area where they could pull their trucks in and set up camp and actually position a bit. But I got to tell you, one of the most, frightening moments was when the wind was blowing, the smoke was really intense. And the fire chief came up at one time saying, Bill, you really want to get out of here. When they blow that horn, I think it was twice, we're out of here. And he said, by that time, it might be too late for you to get out of here. And anyway, when the fire department came and we were there and we were pretty fire ready, putting foam on, clearing, we got pumps in the pool, we tapped into the well water. I had a friend of mine, Chet Hilgars from Hilgars Earth Moving, come up with a water truck, a good friend. He had a water truck we positioned. We did everything we could. But when those winds started hitting, and I was talking to my family in Santa Barbara, and the evacuation had occurred, and I was sitting there with 7 friends, and the fire captain at the time came in and said, I need everybody's name, number, first to Ken, because I got to tell you guys, when this thing hits, it's not going to be like you're going to have time to like get out of here. And anyway, there was a moment where I was talking to my wife and saying, telling my kids I love them, when I realized that what action I had chosen was really maybe not the smartest action. And then the fire team came in and said to me, hey, what's your fire plan? I said, well, he goes, well, do you have a buddy system? Where are you going to go? What were you? And started to really drill us on what we didn't know. And when he started to get into that place, like what's your buddy system, what's your communication system, where are you going? Where are you defending first? Where are you moving to? Where's your safe zone? Do you have blankets? Do you have, it was too late to leave. And all I can say is I was scared shitless. Anyway, as the story goes, fire came. We were active. The fire department was there. They brought some correctional facility folks in, and I'll never forget them having 2x2 lined up, probably 24, 28 of them. I forget how many. They were training them. They let them go up into the foothills behind the house to put out the embers. And when the smoke was blowing and the Nordoff Ridge was blowing and we were expecting it to come down Stewart Canyon, I was just praying, And anyway, long story short, Ojai didn't have the Nordoff Ridge blow down Stewart Canyon. And while there was spot fires all around Upper Foothill area and obviously Nordoff with structures burning, we were spared. During those 3, days and nights where there was overnight vigilance and, I was watching the embers fly. And I was watching it light up the mountain ranges, and I was just going, whoa, like flying embers, like that is really the moment of life and death. That is the moment of everything. And so that's what gave me the idea for the brand that was actually we were making right there and ultimately protecting with the team that ultimately came with me to the company. And that's the connection between the Thomas Fire and Flying Embers.
I like it. That's a great story. Having been on the other side of those conversations, I think sometimes people, if you have never seen an aggressive wildfire blow through an area, it's hard to really understand what that is. And it's hard to explain that to someone who's never seen it because they don't think it's that big of a deal. But, obviously when that fire comes, and thankfully it didn't blow right through your property, it's chaos. It's like nothing you've ever seen. I mean, you literally think the world is ending, and which is why they have those questions and are trying to document all those things. But good point for anybody who's listening. In the end, rarely would anybody say, I'm going to sacrifice my life to save this house because this is my house, right? Like in the end, it doesn't really matter, right? What matters is that you live to breathe another day. But
that's interesting. Breathe. I mean, breath, air. I mean, I got to tell you, it was the smoke that they were really focused on too. It was like, hey, you could choke before you get burnt, and you can't see, you can't move, you don't know where you're going. And that's what I experienced that was really, really daunting. And there was a newfound respect for the first responders and firefighters. Like, this isn't about like making sure you don't get burnt. This is to make sure that you have visibility, you have a way out, you could breathe. Like it was so much more, there's so much more to it than I ever imagined. And luckily, so
as we come up to the 5th anniversary, when we're recording this, we're getting up to that 5th anniversary of the Thomas Fire. So it's good to hear you remembering that. What a testament to Mother Nature and all the prep in the world. And you're still kind of going, man, I don't know how this is going to turn out. And we all just kind of prep and do what we can and hold on, like Peter's saying. If you've never been there, until you're there and you're actually seeing it, smelling it, trying to breathe through it, there's just nothing quite like that force of nature.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say is you could have had 10 fire engines lined up there. And if that fire chose to blow directly down that canyon and through your property, they're not putting it out.
That's right.
They themselves are going to turn the engines on and get out of there because, I mean, Mother Nature is a force. And anyhow, so interesting story. I love how it kind of birthed the brand, and obviously the brand's been successful. I mean, I see it in all the grocery stores. I like it. I've got some at my house right now, but what I want to talk about is your guys' foundation. So Flying Embers, and hopefully you can give some clarity to our listeners, also has a foundation, and the first responder connection seems to be one of the primary focuses of it. Can you kind of walk us through what work does the foundation do? How did it come about? Maybe how did it come about? It's the wrong question, but tell us a little bit about the foundation side of the business.
Well, when we first started, I wanted to commit to giving back. So we've been giving back before we set up the nonprofit. We were giving back to local firefighters and fire causes really up and down the coast. So we've been committing that, and we've given, I would say, I think probably over $300,000-$400,000 to those in needs. From the Talent Fire Department, we actually we gave some money to the folks up there after they lost their firehouse to different causes. So we've been doing that just as a way through the company. But what we realized is that we should really have a nonprofit where we could take not only the sales of our product and give to the foundation, but also then use that as footing for other folks to invest or donate into it. And so out of that, we created the Embers Foundation about a year ago. It's 501c3. And, the first and most important part of it is, focusing on disaster response, focusing on what we can do to support, first and foremost, the first responders with mental health support, equipment, materials. We've learned that a lot of the early trainees that are looking to get into it, some of them don't have the money to buy the equipment. We've supported that. So everywhere from, I would say, supporting the first responders and getting the help they need for the challenges they're going through to helping those that are looking to get into that particular vocation is really was the initial place where we wanted to put our money. In addition to that, fire prevention, things like I initially got started with the Ohio Valley Fire Safe Council. How do we really create wildland fire mitigation and management that can help manage or modulate these fires when they get out of control? So we're putting money into that, as well, sort of the rewilding, which is where we have devastation, burn. What can we do to help support the rebirth and the regrowth and the reforestation of that area? So those are the real areas that we're really focused on.
Hey, this is Joe Booth from the Ventura Fire Foundation. To learn more about the foundation and our programs, visit our website at www.venturafirefoundation.org. 100% of our funding comes from generous donors. If you like what we're doing, I encourage you to become a donor. It's very easy. Just go to our website, again that's venturafirefoundation.org, and click the red donate button at the top. Whether it's $5 or $5,000, every donation helps ensure local firefighters thrive.
You mentioned firefighter mental health was one of the areas, and I'm just curious what because obviously, you're not a firefighter. You come from a different world, and obviously, you're a huge supporter, and I definitely respect everything you guys are doing. Help me think through the thought process when you first encountered firefighters and mental health issues. How did you interpret that when you first heard it, and then also, what is your experience with your foundation in those issues? Because we're obviously the big push of the Ventura Fire Foundation is to support the mental health of the firefighters and their families and bring awareness to all the issues. And I'm just kind of curious what your perspective is on that, coming from your background and kind of getting involved through your foundation. Just if you could kind of speak to that, I think that'd be good.
So Joe Boychek was someone that was introduced to me through Craig Doolittle, and I got to know Joe quite well. And he lost his son in a firefight in Arizona. A movie was made about the 13 that ended up perishing. And when I really went down there and got to know him at the museum and spent a lot of time with him, he came up here. I really started to understand really what the real issues were with regard to firefighters and mental health challenges. And there's a lot of reasons why that is, but simply put, it's a big need. So through him and through some of the organizations he directed us to, we began to give back in that way. So I think that was really my point of contact and understanding around those needs, was really through Joe and his experience losing his son and his experience with his 35 years in the service, in the firefighter, being a firefighter, really informed me what's really needed and why.
It's not often that you see someone championing the causes of the fire service from the business world, like where you come from. And I think it's commendable. I think it's awesome that you're helping us bring awareness to the issues. Clearly you had a connection it sounds like it was a little bit transformational in your life, and that's kind of where you're headed with it now. But I think it's awesome to see from our perspective, because I, in full disclosure, retired a year ago, so I'm obviously not in it day to day anymore. But the firefighters that are in it day to day, I mean, these are real issues that are affecting people more and more as we see changes in the fire service, and more people are calling 911. People are busy. Jason, for example, I was just having a quick conversation with him before we started, and he shared with me, and I asked him if I could share this. So that he slept 4 hours in the last 3 days, and he's like, "Hey, I'm pretty much in a fog. You're going to have to help me on the podcast." But those are the things that firefighters are dealing with, and it's not just sleep deprivation, but it's all the issues on top of that. You take someone, you deprive them of sleep. You make them go do things that the regular public would not voluntarily do. So these things compound, and it's just, I guess from my position, I'm thankful that there are people such as yourself who are helping us in bringing awareness to the cause of what the fire service has.
The other thing I realized that actually I didn't know is that firefighters, most of their time is doing more than firefighting, right? It's the accidents in the highway. It's the domestic violence calls. It's the issues that, really are quite impactful when you look at what they're doing. And like I said, my good friend Craig Doolittle, he said, "Look, I spend more time on the 101 dealing with what I see, the carnage on the highway, which is really like mentally tough to see what he's seen over his time." So firefighters have so many, first responders, firefighters have so many responsibilities and point of contact that, we all just think, oh, it's the fire. That's such a small part of it, is what I've realized.
Yeah, and I want to appreciate you for a minute and thank you for your philanthropy too. As Peter said, I'm quiet this podcast. I'm still trying to get my brain to work a little bit, but I appreciate what you do. And, just to tag on to our last awards ceremony, and that you raised your hand to be the presenting sponsor and be a part of that with the foundation. And that was my first face-to-face introduction with you. So I wanted to thank you for that. And also recognizing, like Peter said, there's the stuff beyond the physical trauma and toll that firefighters deal with, and that you recognize that and go more than just surface deep.
Thank you.
Firefighter mental health is getting a fair amount of awareness, which is good. Like, it's working. The work that foundations like yours and ours, and we're not the only ones by any means. There's other professional organizations and foundations that are bringing awareness to it. But I think one thing that's really not talked about very much, and it goes along with our mission, which is to help our firefighters, when they're having times of need and their families and all that stuff, is a firefighter. If you think about it, they're very similar to a professional athlete, not in the salaries that they earn, but in the fact that they have to perform. They have to perform at a high level physically, right? It's a very demanding job. It requires, a lot of manual labor over time, right? The average firefighter career is, 25, 30 years. And if a firefighter gets hurt, and this happens, I don't want to say all the time, but over the career of a firefighter, for sure, they've had one or two injuries that potentially are career ending. And it could be something silly, like, you blew your knee out, or it could be something more aggressive, like, got injured in a structure fire. I know I had like some ceiling material fall on my head in a structure fire once, which thankfully I didn't get hurt. But there are things like that are career ending injuries for firefighters. And I think firefighters in general, they focus on being a firefighter and they're good at it. They're not out there diversifying their assets and having a plan A and a plan B and a plan C for if things don't work out. And I'm interested in your perspective for someone who comes from the business world, who's had a great deal of success, who probably has a lot of experience putting teams together and being an entrepreneur, and your background in finance and Wall Street and all those things. One of the things that I try to champion is our guys need a plan B, because you're only as good as your body holds up, right? So if you are physically unable to do the job of being a firefighter, you're done. Arguably, you might have some medical retirement benefits or something along those lines, but it's not enough to where you're just going to, go to the beach and sip Mai Tais for the rest of your life. So I try to get, the guys that I know that you need to be thinking about plan B, because if you get hurt, guess what? You still have your family. You still have to provide for them. You still have all these obligations, but you don't want to be in a spot where all I was a firefighter, and that was my number one mission, and that's the only thing I knew how to do. And tomorrow you can't do it. And now what? So coming from your background and your experience, what advice would you have along the lines of what would you tell a firefighter and how to prepare or diversify themselves for if they do get injured and aren't able to do that anymore?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and it's not an easy one to answer because so much of it is predicated on the person, the life stage they're in, et cetera. Everybody needs to find their passion, and whatever we end up doing in career or as an ancillary sort of opportunity to make some money in a career, it's got to be sourced with something you really love. I would say that firefighters, they usually have a lot of skills that they don't realize they could apply. I know that when a couple of my friends retired, they got into different organizations to help them and help mostly educate on education, how to advise and teach kids and others what to do to be fire ready, what to do to be fire smart. So whether or not that's a vocation that could provide any kind of income is really dependent upon an organization that you get with or not. But I think the bottom line is as you go through your life in any one profession, so many of us have other things we love to do that relate to something that's tactile or something that's relate to something that's virtual or computer based or whatnot. And I would just say that, continue to develop skills that should something happen to a firefighter where they can no longer want to work in that field because of mental health challenges or other things, that they could rely on something that they know in their core, they have a competence, they have an acumen and a competency for. And whatever that it is, it's got to be something that they consciously think of and curate while they're living their life as a firefighter. I know that I do that as an entrepreneur. I mean, there are certain things that I know I would go to today if in fact, one of them would be I love landscaping. So I was going to say, hey, if there comes a time where I just can't go through the grind of the stress of starting a new company and everything and being away from home, and God forbid if someone in my family gets sick and I have to be near home all the time, whatever. I know that what I'm going to do is I'm going to start landscaping because so something like that is something along those lines. I think is what folks got to think about. Simply put.
I think that's great advice. I've often said that what's required to get hired at the fire department, there was a study, I can't quote it, but it was like from the time someone says, I think I want to be a firefighter to when they are actually hireable, where they're going to get a job, somewhere like 4 to 6 years. And what you have to do between the time when you say, I think I want to be a fireman, and you're actually going to be hireable as a fireman is a ton of things, like a bunch of hoops to jump through, from education and personal development and learning how to do all the things. And I'm also an entrepreneur, not at the same level you are, maybe one day, but I've often said, if you can get hired at the fire department, you have all the pieces that's required to be an entrepreneur or have some success in any profession, because really it's about grit. It's about not quitting. It's about, taking information in, analyzing it, and taking action. Like all the things that firefighters are good at apply in business. And I know and the other thing is, sorry, I'm rambling, but I'm passionate about this. Because of the mental health issues that we have in the fire service, it is causing some firefighters to rethink being firefighters. And that's that's sad on one hand and reality on the other hand. And it's a weird spot to be in when you don't have anything to fall back on. And I think a lot of that is fear, because I think, like you were saying, they probably do have a skill set. They probably do have a passion, something that they care deeply about. That fear is probably holding them back from having the confidence that's needed to go out and do something, to go out and create a plan B for their family and have, an alternate plan should firefighting not work out. But
and speaking of
interesting perspective you have.
Speaking of a plan B, just so Bill and I are connected more, I used to brew beer for years at my house, and that was super fun. And I actually did some kombucha as well many years ago. So I have a small appreciation for what it takes and what you go through. That's pretty cool. Tell me.
You got to get down here for a visit.
Oh, I'd love it. I think we talked at the foundation meeting about the time that I went there, and there was a broken sprinkler line in the building.
Oh, that's right.
That's the first intro I had to Flying Embers. And they said, hit us up when you guys need anything or when you want a sponsorship. And lo and behold, you guys were definitely there saying, we want to support you guys. I have intel on your property in Ojai from Casper saying you use that as a yoga and a mental health retreat as well. Is that true? And how did that get started on your own property?
Yeah, we've done that for a while. I have a fairly big 20 some acres, and we had I guess I just started I wanted to use it for some sort of way of people gathering and processing. So, we just, Casper came into my life. He was a chef, and he also did retreats for folks to help them work through their issues. And so out of that, we started to open the place up to have different folks come in to do what process work they do for their particular mental health issues. And one of my earlier career paths was I did start a company called the Recovery Network. Ironically, so I mean it was a network that was dealt with substance abuse and other kinds of issues that families have, and so out of that history of realizing that a lot of affected others in the family have challenges around the loved ones, that providing a safe place for people to talk about it and to process that was something I've always been interested in. My mother was an alcoholic, and so when I was growing up, there was a lot of challenges. She ended up getting clean and sober, but that kind of gave me some experience around mental health as it related to recovery and recovery-related issues.
Yeah, it's funny. You talk about the family. So one of the areas that we're trying to focus on, because firefighter mental health is pretty broad, right? There's a lot that goes into it. Substance abuse is a big part of it, right? It's coping mechanisms for numbing the things you're seeing. But one of the areas that we are trying to focus on is the families and taking care of their needs, because arguably the firefighters, it's not everything they need, but they have each other. So when you're at the fire station or you're deployed on a wildland fire, like you're not really by yourself. You have people that you can, chat with who understand what's going on. There's a camaraderie there, but the families are stuck at home and they're minus the firefighter for a third to a half of their lives. And they're suffering with similar things. And then if you want to add substance abuse issues on top of that, when the firefighter comes home, it starts to create a big mess. And one of the areas that we've identified that is neglected is the families, because honestly, the firefighters wouldn't be what they are without the families. And I think most of them would say, take care of the family over me if you ask them. But that's one of the areas we're focusing on. It sounds like you have some relevancy there.
Anybody that's got a vocation, occupation that's high stress, that brings it home, the family needs to be prepared. The family is affected. The family needs to know how to interact when a firefighter scrapes someone off of the 405, the 101, the 126. I mean, there's some real, from what I've learned and what I've seen through my friends, there's some real shit that goes on. Really affects the wellness, the mental health of firefighters. And the family really needs to have the tools to know how to manage that, how to deal with it, how to interact, or how not to. Because without that support group, when you face some shit that it's hard to cope with, it's tough to get through it. So I think it's real important the family has the tools.
Absolutely. I can tell you have some experience with that. The words you're using and what you're doing in your own life, I'm sure you've had some stress in your successes. The meditation, nutrition, yoga, sleep, all that stuff is super important, and you're hitting it. That's right.
Yeah, I know one of the things the foundation's been able to do the last couple of events we've had have been basically the spouses. Is like, hey, we don't want the firefighters to come or be a part of this. We want the spouses here, and we bring in mental health professionals to just bring awareness to what's going on, and it's okay. And these are the issues that you're facing, and you're not alone. And we're trying, I think our first step is to bring some awareness to the family side of it. And then as we become more successful at fundraising and our organization grows, we want to actually provide some professional therapy to the families and take it kind of to the next level. And we're just at the beginning stages of kind of devising what that plan looks like. But I know I'm excited about doing it for the families because, like I said, they're pretty underserved. Well, Bill, I want to say thanks for coming on. I mean, it's been great. We appreciate you. We appreciate the team you have over at Flying Embers, what they've done for our little foundation. Love the fact that you guys are in our backyard, essentially. I mean, I think you have facilities in Ventura, and then you just live, 20 minutes away in Ojai. But appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come on and share your stories regarding Thomas Fire and the good work that your foundation's doing, and how, it's making an impact on the issues that the fire service is facing. It doesn't go unnoticed, and we definitely appreciate the support.
I appreciate it, Peter and Jason. Thanks for the service. And I feel a kinship, even though I've never been a firefighter. I feel kinship with all of you. And thank you for everything you do. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you ever want to come do a ride along, just say the word. We'll take you around on the engine and show you firsthand what we do.
I would love that. I really would. So let's get that set up.
I can make that happen. And as much as you've never had the uniform on, it sounds like you were pretty deep in firefighting for a couple days there during the Thomas Fire. So thanks for that.
Jason, I'm going to connect with you on that. Thank you both. Really appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Bill. Wow, that was a great show, Jason. There was a lot of stuff in that show that I wasn't expecting necessarily. You could just hear the passion in his voice that he had for the fire service. I mean, he went out and founded the Ojai Fire Safe Council. Like, who does that, right? Like, he's a supporter, and he gets it, which was awesome.
Yeah, his experience that he talked about with some recovery that he had to deal with his family, his mom being an alcoholic, and then to understanding kind of what we go through with some of his connections and friends that he has. It's unusual to find somebody who's not a firefighter kind of understand the mental health side of it. It was good for him to talk about that. And then his passion towards his actual understanding and fear of understanding what it's like to be in a huge brush fire situation, and that Mother Nature wins every time.
Yeah. The fact that he was like, I got the feeling that he was regretting his decision to stay. And thankfully, it all worked out, stay behind at the Thomas Fire. But yeah, great guy, great supporter. I'm stoked to have him on our team. And it sounds like he pretty much supports all the firefighters, which is awesome. So yeah, great show.
Now I got to make good with my promise for a ride along for him. So we'll make that happen.
Yeah, no, you absolutely. Hopefully you get some good calls when he comes.